Good morning again. It's good to see everyone still. You know, it's one thing to try to love our enemies. It's hard. But it's hard to love them because of what they've done, but it's a little bit easy because sometimes they're out there. Right? So you might see them at work, you might see them down the street, but you can go to your refuge and your safe place and kind of regroup and that sort of thing. And so it's a challenge to love your enemies. But when the enemies come inside, or people whom you trust all of a sudden start acting different, that's another sort of challenge to learn to love the people from the inside. Because a lot of times we have our group, we have our people that we come around and we want to develop into this character of love and patience and the fruit of the Spirit and all that. But then what happens when we start being shaped by how we're treated? We start changing that. We start getting a little bit bitter, a little bit angry, a little bit snippy, where I've been practicing saying nice things and all of a sudden I find myself shaping my words differently. And so the question I want to talk about today is, who controls your character? Because we can say I'm in control and we can know I'm in control and we can make that choice I'm in control. However, we find ourselves being nudged into certain behaviors based on the people around us. And I want to be a loving person, but there are people that said something I didn't expect, especially from them. And when it comes into my safe place that I'm challenged, now there's something going on inside of me. I remember as, as middle school, that's such a rough age, isn't it? Middle school, junior high, high school, the things that go on there, that everybody's so insecure that they say mean things to each other and they hurt each other's feelings. And a lot of people grow out of that. Some people don't. But that's just a tough time. Well, there were some kids that didn't say nice things about me. And then they came to church. That was really awkward. Because the church was my safe place. The youth group, a lot of times was my older brother and me. Sometimes there were other kids, but sometimes we got along, and no, we got along great. But the youth group was small, but then when these kids from school came, it was really an uncomfortable feeling, because where I came from my safe place became a place where I didn't know how to act or how to react, and I didn't handle it well. I was frustrated because I wanted there to be a place to be safe. And we think about our challenges when the challenges come from within the safe realm that we're in. And I want us to think about that when we think about Jesus at the Last Supper. Jesus was gathering up his guys, and his guys, he'd spent several years with them, talking, teaching, training, working with these guys, and they were hard-headed and they were slow to learn, but they were his guys, right? But this night was going to have their character revealed. The people who were his people, and especially Peter, who said, "I've got your back. I'm there for you." He said, "No, you don't. You're not going to have my back tonight." How do you who controls your character? Is a question that Jesus he'd be affected, because these guys are going to fuss, they're going to argue, they're going to do all kinds of things that night. And how's he going to stay focused on doing what's right? So I want us to turn to John chapter 13, and I want us to think about this night where Jesus is determined to show love to these guys. If you turn over to John chapter 13, it says, "Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Now, during the supper, when the devil had already put it in the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he had come from God, was going back to God, rose from supper. Now, I want us to look that he loved his own to the end. He wanted them to know that he loved them to the end. And there's this battle, and you and I have struggled with this battle, to love somebody to the end, even though we know their character is flawed. Even though we've experienced maybe betrayal from people that we still want to see good in their life. And this is what Jesus was doing. The devil had entered Judas already, and Peter, he's so bold, he doesn't know what's going on, but he thinks he does. And Jesus wants to say, I love you to the end. And he makes it a point during this supper to tell Peter, Peter, you're going to betray me. And Peter's like, ain't no way. I got your back. He goes, no, you're going to betray me. But Jesus is determined to love him to the end. And Jesus is determined to love him to the end. Now, how does that character stay true? How does he hold on to this determination to love them to the end when he knows? Peter's going to say, I don't even know the man, 3 times that night. When he knows that Judas has already made an agreement for 30 pieces of silver to hand him over. And he says, I'm going to love them to the end, the people on the inside, the people at my safe place. How does he do that? Is a question that we need to ask, because we have people on the inside who will hurt us, who will betray us, maybe even sell us out. And if we want to stay, as Jesus stayed, faithful to loving to the end, we need to ask this question: how am I going to do this? What motivated Jesus in this night to wash their feet? We see that Jesus, he got up, he wanted to love him to the end. He got up and wrapped the towel around his waist, and he started washing feet, which, and maybe you've heard, first off, that's the job of the lowest servant in the household. Why? Because they've been walking with sandals all day without socks. I mean, that'd be a bad fashion statement with socks, but they were walking in sandals without socks on roads that were not clean, on roads where the donkeys walked, on roads where the dogs went, on roads where people may have thrown their bucket out the window after going to the bathroom. The roads weren't clean. And so when you're washing feet, there's no telling what's on their feet, but there's a good guess that it wasn't nice. And that's why the lowest servant would have that job. So here Jesus gets up and wraps the towel around his waist, and he starts washing feet. Why? Because he wanted to show his love to the very end. Knowing the character of the people in his inner circle. I mean, Peter, he was one of the 3, right? When Jesus went away all the time, he'd gather up Peter, James, and John, and they go do stuff together, and they were part of the 3. And that was going to be true that night as well when he goes off to pray, Peter, James, and John, when he's off all praying, not my will but yours be done. And he has these guys in his inner circle that are there. And Peter, the loud-mouthiest of them all, was going to betray him, but Jesus is going to wash his feet. Verse 5, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. And he came to Simon Peter, who said, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered, what I'm doing, you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said, you will never wash my feet. Jesus answered, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said, Lord, not my feet, but my head and my hands too. Jesus said, one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you, because he knew which one was going to betray him. He's down there washing the feet. Now for us, that's an uncomfortable thing. If you ever done that at church camp, there's, sometimes we're washing each other's feet, and having somebody wash my feet is like, no thanks, no. And Peter was like that, no thanks, not you, Jesus. I mean, my feet are dirty. And Peter's like, yeah. Or Jesus is like, yeah. He wanted to show his love to the end. Why did he do this? Now, just to think about, in John 13 through 17 is a section of Scripture. And it's about teaching faith. It's about the Holy Spirit coming. It's about the vine and the branches that I love you. And it's about you need to show love to each other. There's a whole thing, and it's all about when Jesus leaves, how are these guys, these 12 guys that are obnoxious and argumentative, going to handle being in charge of the church? And so you read John 13 through 17, and Jesus is shaping their thinking and shaping their minds so they know how to love to the end, even in the middle of church conflict, even in the middle of challenges. It's a similar sort of thing in Matthew 23, 24, and 25. He's trying to say, when I'm gone, don't get carried off into your own arrogance, into your own self-preservation, but you need to be faithful in serving. And so that's what this section's about, but to love to the end. How do we learn that? What motivated Jesus to wash their feet? He says, Peter, you don't understand now, but you're going to have a new understanding. That night after Peter betrayed Jesus and he went out and wept bitterly, I wonder if he thought about how Jesus had washed his feet that night. And Jesus said, I knew what you were going to do and I washed your feet anyway. Because Jesus wanted them to learn to love, but know that they're loved. The first thing that motivated Jesus is he wanted them to know that they were loved, even though they were about to make a big mistake, a betrayal. He wanted us to know, and he passes us down through all the centuries. He wants you to know that he loves you and that he died for you, even knowing everything you're going to do. And he loves you so much that he's going to die for you and raise you up and draw you close and invite you. He knows that you're going to betray him. He knows you're going to sin. He knows you're going to let him down. He knows you're going to be frustrated and be the one who's in the inner circle, who's unfaithful to him. He knows you and I are the ones that he's gathered up, and then we're going to struggle. And he wants you to know he loves you to the end anyway. He was so motivated because he had to show that knowing everything he knew about Peter and about Judas, he's washing their feet anyway because he loves them. And he wants you to know, as you read through this 13, 14, 15, where he says, I'm going to lay down my life for you. Because that's what this love does. That he loves you to the end. Knowing everything about you. Knowing that you are the one that's unfaithful in the inner circle of Jesus. He still invites you. He says, this isn't always going to go smooth, and I know you're going to have a hard time. I know you're going to struggle with those sins that keep drawing you back. I know you're going to struggle with your attitude. I know you're going to have, but I love you anyway. To the end. And so that's what motivated Jesus to wash feet. And that's why his character was controlled not by the behavior of his friends who were going to betray him, but his behavior was controlled by the love that he and the Father have for them. His behavior was controlled by what he wanted for them. He looked beyond, as Hebrews 12 says, he looked through the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of. He looked through the suffering to what he was going to do. And he looks through the challenges and the failures of Peter, and he says, I know who Peter's going to be, and I know what Peter's going to do, and I know Peter's going to fail before he gets there. But he looks through all that. And his character, his decision to love and to wash feet was based on looking through the moments of unfaithfulness to the plan that he had for Peter and the apostles. And when he loves us looking through and past that unfaithful times and those weaknesses that we have to who he has made us to be and who he is calling us to be and who he's drawing us and inviting us to be, because he said, I died for you, as Romans 5 says, while you were still sinners, Christ died for us, because he's looking through our failures into his victory in us and his victory for us and his victory through us as we learn to love with the love of God and wash feet and to serve even people who have been in our inner circle and have proved themselves unfaithful. Wanting to show his love, he loved to the end. For Peter, for the apostles, and for us. So he had the discussion. One of you is going to betray me. Judas goes out to betray him. He has a discussion. Peter, you're going to deny me, but I washed your feet anyway. Then we get in John 13 and verse 31. He says, when he had gone out, Jesus says, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God glorified in him. If God's glorified in him, God will also glorify in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I'm with you. You will seek me just as the Jews. So now I say to you, where I'm going, you can't come. And a new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You're also to love one another. By this, all the people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. If you love each other to the end. If you love each other knowing the failure that's about to happen, I'm going to love you to the end. I'm going to wash your feet. I'm going to serve you. Because I know God's got something for you. And I want to show you how much God loves you, because I want to show that love. Who controls your character? Is it the behavior of others and what they say and what they do? Does that shape your character? Well, I'm not putting up with that. Well, have you decided to become bitter because of somebody else's behavior? Or have you decided to become loving because Christ loves you anyway? And if Christ loves me, I got to learn to love. Well, how am I going to do that? So the question is, what motivated Jesus to wash feet? It's because he loved, because he had this vision beyond the failure into this victory. Well, what about us? How do we get there? Well, it's got to be coming back to Jesus. If we look in Galatians chapter 2, Paul's writing to a church, and the churches, because Galatia is a region, not just a city. He's writing to them, and they're having trouble. There's conflict in the church, a lot of conflict, a lot of struggle. And he says, I'll tell you what, here's how we need to look at it. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life that I know live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Again, we have to reflect on Jesus loved us anyway, and he wanted to show the extent of his love, so he laid down in service. And so this way of thinking, this way of living, is I've decided that's what I'm going to do. Now we have choices. We can give in to bitterness. We can hold on to anger. We can focus all of our frustration and be so full that I'm unable to love. But Paul said, I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ in me, the Christ, the one who washes feet, the Christ who died for our sins, the Christ who invites us to come along anyway so he can clean us up and redirect us. That is what motivates Paul. Now, did Paul have reason to get bitter? He's out there preaching the gospel to people, and he gets swept up into jail, and he's beaten. In Acts 16, it says he was singing praises anyway. because he's decided that he belongs to Christ and he's going to do it Christ's way. He's going to wash feet. He's going to sing praises to God. He's going to keep reaching out. And when he's in Jerusalem, you get in Acts 22, he's there. He's trying to tell the truth to his friends and trying to tell the truth to the people that he grew up with. And they are hating on him and they're trying to beat him to death. So the Romans had to come in and surround him. And he's already been attacked physically. And he's up there. He says, I want to say something to these people. These people that he'd grown up with, some of them he'd gone to school with, studied the scriptures with, looking out on the crowd, says, I want you to know Christ. He didn't call down curses, but he desperately taught them that Jesus died for them. Because he wanted for them, and he says it in Romans, he said, I wish I could give up my own soul for these people that just don't get it. They don't get the Christ. They won't turn. They won't come. And they're going to persecute him and beat him. They wanted Paul dead, and Paul wanted them saved. And they wanted him dead, and Paul wanted them saved. And they beat Paul, and Paul showed love. Because he was motivated that they know salvation. Just like Jesus was motivated that his disciples knew love. And the only way we're going to get there is if we die to ourselves. Jesus said that, right? Take up your cross daily. The cross is something you die on. It's like, Ron, you're not doing today because you do it pretty poorly whenever you try to do it. Jesus is going to do today. The life that I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. Because it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Today is Jesus' day through me. Because Jesus wants me saved, and Jesus wants you saved, and Jesus wants those troublemakers in the inner circle saved. And that's what, as you read Galatians, as you go through it, you get into chapter 6. If anyone's caught in a sin, you who are spiritual, restore them. Because Paul sees the trouble even within the church where we get frustrated with each other. We get tired of each other. We get worn out dealing with each other. And pretty soon we're just, forget you. I've seen you struggle with that sin and I'm tired of it. But in Galatians 6, he says, if anyone's caught in a transgression, you who are spiritual, restore him in a spirit of gentleness, keeping watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens and fulfill the law of Christ. Because if anyone thinks he's something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. So being crucified with Christ moves in as he ends the letter. It has to do with us helping people who are struggling. Those people who are coming against us in the inner circle, just like Peter betrayed or denied Jesus, there's something going on within them that they need to know that you can come back. They need to know that you cannot cause me to not love you. You can't do it. Why is that? If you back up, you're looking at it just a few verses earlier in Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are the things that God equips us with so that we can reach out to restore. Should we choose to have that sort of goal and purpose and idea. To not be shaped in my character into anger and bitterness because of how I'm treated by somebody else, but to be shaped into love and compassion and service because of how I'm treated by Christ. That's why we got to keep coming back to Christ, to remember how I'm treated by him so I can have the same purpose. So, who is it that controls your character? Have you handed the control to somebody else? There was a devotional that I heard back when I was a teenager about who has your remote control. You know, control the TV? Who's got it? And that's a powerful place, right, in your house. Whoever has the remote control, right, it's important. It's a very important thing. But who has the remote control to your decisions? Who has the remote control to your emotions? Who has the remote control to your anger? Who has the remote control to your love? Have you handed it to somebody who's been mean to you? Why would you do that? They have shown they're not responsible with their words or anything. Why would you give them the remote control to your response? I'm going to find somebody who's better at the remote control. Maybe Jesus has a remote control to give me a love response to the hate input. Who has your remote control? Who have you allowed to control? Even yourself, because you have your own talk. When you look in the mirror, you control your emotions and, man, I messed that up. I'm a bad person. I'm guilty. I'm a sinner. And we have a whole list of negative things to say. And Jesus said, I died for you to wipe that all away so you could come to me. Who has your remote control? Because when Jesus has it, and we let him have it, we're able to wash the feet of the unfaithful. But when we take it back, we don't. Definitely when we give it to the unfaithful to control my emotions, that's not going well either, is it? If we want to be the people who are able to wash the feet of the unfaithful, we need to give that remote control to Jesus. I've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live. Not I, but Christ in me. And that's a choice, as Romans 6 said, if we've been joined with him in the baptism, we say, that I'm in, I'm all in, and we've done that. And I say, I'm going to walk a new life now. I've been crucified with Christ. But if you're struggling with that because you haven't given the remote control to Christ, and you're ready today to do that, let's do that. If you need to pray together about that, to study about that, or if you need to come to Christ, you've been living kind of on your own and you said, I haven't been baptized into Christ. I don't know what, but I'm ready. We can do that too. But decide who has the control of your character. And if it's not Christ, let's work together to get it to be Christ. And if you need prayers or to come to be baptized, come down when we stand and sing this next song.
Any